You say both your guests are going to be sitting here?
All of you sit. Well, once you're
usually
finished.
There's a sofa, isn't there?
We all remember the headlines from 2018, the private drama of Colin Firth and Livia Giuggioli. At the time, it was framed as a brief, rough patch, followed by a quiet separation. But 7 years later, the dust has finally settled, and Livia is finally speaking out. It turns out the affair wasn't just a momentary lapse. It was a reaction to a much more complicated reality behind closed doors. Today, we're looking at what really happened inside Colin Firth's marriage and what led to its end. Oscar-winning actor Colin Firth and his wife, Livia Giuggioli, had been married for 22 years. And for most of that time, their life together looked almost untouched by the kind of chaos that usually follows fame. From the outside, it was easy to believe they had figured it out, settled in the Italian countryside, raising their two sons, Luca and Matteo, far from the noise. But behind that calm picture, something else had been unfolding quietly, and by the time it reached the surface, it was already too complicated to contain. By 2019, their marriage came to an end, but that ending did not begin where people thought it did. To understand what really happened, you have to go back to the beginning, to a time when everything between them felt certain. They met in 1995 on the set of the British-Italian mini-series Nostromo. He was the star, already building his name, and she was working behind the scenes as a production assistant. It could have been just another passing encounter on a set, but it wasn't. For him, it landed instantly. He later described that moment as something that stopped him in place, remembering how he had been standing on the steps of an old church when he saw her moving through the crowd. And in that second, it felt like something hit him straight in the chest, leaving him unable to move. 2 years later, that moment turned into a marriage. They were married in a 13th century church near her hometown, Città della Pieve, and then built their life in Umbria, just outside Tuscany. It was not a temporary escape. It became home. He stayed, fully stepping into that life, eventually becoming an Italian citizen, blending his world with hers completely. Their family grew soon after. In 2001, they welcomed Luca, and 2 years later, Matteo. For her, it was the beginning of motherhood. For him, it was a continuation, already having an older son, Will, from his previous relationship with actress Meg Tilly. On the surface, everything aligned: family, stability, a shared life that seemed grounded and intentional. Then, in 2018, something shifted, and it did not stay private. Their relationship was suddenly pulled into the spotlight when reports surfaced through an Italian newspaper that they had gone to the police. They claimed that a man, Italian journalist Marco Brancaccia, had been stalking them. According to the complaint, it had been going on for years: messages, emails, phone calls, even photos sent directly to Firth. It painted a picture of intrusion, something persistent and unsettling. But almost as quickly as that version came out, another one followed, and it changed everything. Brancaccia denied the accusations and insisted there was more to the story. He claimed that he and Giuggioli were not strangers, not even distant acquaintances, but childhood friends who had become romantically involved. According to him, it was not a case of harassment, but a relationship that had already happened, one that, in his words, had gone far enough that she had considered leaving her marriage. He pushed back further, describing the so-called stalking as limited to a couple of messages after the relationship ended in June 2016, along with an email he later admitted he regretted sending to Firth. That email, he suggested, exposed the relationship, and from his perspective, the complaint against him came from a fear that he might reveal more, including details about her marriage and her work. He also claimed that during the time they were involved, she had sent him hundreds of messages, along with photos, videos, and even personal writings, suggesting that what they had was not brief or casual. At that point, the situation was no longer controlled, and the truth, or at least parts of it, began to surface from both sides. After his claims became public, Giuggioli addressed what had happened, and her explanation added another layer. She revealed that in 2015, she and Firth had privately separated for about a year, and it was during that period that the relationship with Brancaccia took place. Through a spokesperson, it was explained that the separation had been a mutual decision, made quietly, without public attention, and that during that time, she had briefly become involved with him. The key detail in that statement was not just the affair, but what followed. It confirmed that after that period, she and Firth had reconciled and tried to move forward. Soon after, the legal case against Brancaccia was dropped. Both sides agreed to a private settlement, choosing to close that chapter without pushing it further into public scrutiny. But even though the case was settled, the damage was not. What had been exposed did not disappear once the headlines faded. Whatever had been repaired during their reconciliation did not fully hold, and over time, it became clear that something had changed in a way that could not be undone. In December 2019, they made it official. The marriage ended. The statement released was controlled, almost careful in its tone. It emphasized that they had separated, that they remained close, that their focus was still on their children, and that they were asking for privacy. It gave nothing away beyond that. No details, no explanations, just a quiet closing of something that had lasted over 2 decades. But behind that, there was a simpler reality. According to someone close to them, things never really recovered after the affair and everything that came with it. Even though they had tried to stay together, even though they had built a strong family and wanted to protect it, there was something that lingered. What had happened could not be undone. And no matter what decisions they made afterward, it stayed there, shaping everything that followed. At some point, staying no longer made sense. And just like that, a relationship that had started with something as sudden and certain as love at first sight ended not with a single moment, but with the slow realization that some things, once broken, do not return to what they were. But long before the very public divorce, Colin Firth's life was steady and simple. How Colin Firth found his way to acting. Long before the headlines, before the marriage, before any of it became public, Colin Andrew Firth's story began in a quiet English village, the kind of place where nothing about his future suggested the life he would eventually step into. He was born on September 10, 1960, in Greyshot, Hampshire, into a family shaped by academia and structure. Both of his parents were deeply rooted in education. His mother, Shirley Jean Rolls, taught comparative religion at King Alfred's College, while his father, David Norman Lewis Firth, worked as a history lecturer there and later took on a role as an education officer for the Nigerian government. Learning, discipline, and movement were already built into the rhythm of his early life. He was the eldest of 3, growing up alongside a sister, Kate, who would later find her own path in acting and voice coaching, and a brother, Jonathan, who also stepped into acting. It was a household where expression and performance would quietly take root, even if it was not the original plan. That sense of movement did not stay theoretical. His family's background stretched far beyond England. His grandparents on one side were Congregationalist ministers, and on the other, his grandfather served as an Anglican priest. Missionary work carried them across borders, and that pattern continued into the next generation, with both of his parents having been born and partly raised in India. So from the beginning, his life was never fixed in one place. As a child, he moved often, following wherever his parents' work led. For a period, that meant living in Nigeria, an experience that placed him in a completely different environment at a young age, before eventually moving again, this time to St. Louis, Missouri, when he was around 11. That move did not land easily. He later described that time as difficult, and when he returned to England, the adjustment did not suddenly become smoother. At school, he stood out in a way that made him a target. He was seen as different, and that difference turned into bullying. Instead of pushing against it directly, he adapted. He changed how he spoke, picking up the local working-class Hampshire accent, mirroring the attitudes around him, even copying the visible lack of interest in schoolwork just to blend in. But underneath that adjustment, something else had already started to form. At the age of 10, he began attending drama workshops, and that was where things shifted. It gave him a space where standing out was no longer a disadvantage. By 14, that interest had settled into something more certain. He had already decided he wanted to become a professional actor, even if nothing else in his life seemed to align with that path yet. Academically, he did not connect. School, as he later reflected, felt unengaging, almost empty, as though nothing being taught held any real weight for him. That feeling carried on until he reached Barton Peveril Sixth Form College in Eastleigh, where, for the first time, something clicked. There, an English literature teacher named Penny Edwards changed the direction of his attention. Through her, literature stopped feeling distant and started to hold meaning. And those 2 years became a turning point, not just academically, but personally. He would later look back on that period as one of the happiest times in his life, a rare stretch where things felt aligned. From there, the path became clearer. After finishing sixth form, he moved to London, stepping into an environment that felt closer to what he had been building toward. He joined the National Youth Theatre, and that decision placed him directly inside the world he wanted to be part of. It was not immediate success, but it was access. He met people, built connections, and found his way into the National Theatre, not on stage at first, but working behind the scenes in the wardrobe department. It was a quiet entry point, but it mattered. From there, he took the next step and enrolled at Drama Centre London, where the interest that had started years earlier finally began to take shape into something structured and real. By that point, the direction was set, even if everything that would come after was still waiting just ahead. Colin Firth's rise and evolution as an actor. 3 years after stepping into the industry, Colin Firth reached a moment that changed everything. He made his West End debut in another country, taking on a role inspired by British spy Guy Burgess, a character layered with tension, secrecy, and complexity. It was not just another stage performance. It was a signal that he could hold his own in spaces that demanded precision and depth. When the play was adapted into a film in 1984, he returned, though this time in a different role, already learning that in this industry, movement was constant and nothing stayed fixed for long. Through the late 80s and into the early 90s, he kept working steadily, consistently, building a career piece by piece without the kind of sudden breakthrough that usually defines a moment. Instead, it was a gradual climb. Stage productions, television roles, and films, each one adding another layer. In 1988, something shifted again when he took on Tumbledown, a television film that pushed him into heavier emotional territory. He played a Scottish soldier wounded during the Falklands War, a role centered on pain, recovery, and the slow weight of survival. It did not go unnoticed. The performance earned him his first BAFTA nomination, placing him firmly on the radar. Even then, recognition did not immediately turn into widespread fame. He continued working, appearing in films like Apartment Zero, Valmont, and Circle of Friends, each role sharpening his range. But still, the defining moment had not arrived. That changed in 1995. When he stepped into the role of Fitzwilliam Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, everything aligned in a way it hadn't before. The character was restrained, distant on the surface, carrying a kind of quiet pride that slowly gave way to something more vulnerable. That shift, from cold to deeply human, became the center of his performance, and audiences connected to it instantly. His portrayal did more than land well. It stayed with people. It built a following that was not just about the role, but about him. From that point, the trajectory changed. He moved into a series of films that carried both critical weight and cultural impact. The English Patient and Shakespeare in Love followed, both winning Best Picture at the Academy Awards, placing him within projects that were not only successful, but also defining in their own right. Then, in 2001, he stepped into a role that would echo his past while reshaping it for a new audience. As Mark Darcy in Bridget Jones's Diary, he revisited the essence of Austen's Darcy, but this time through a modern lens. The character was controlled, reserved, and slightly awkward, but grounded in something sincere. That balance made it work, and the audience responded. It became one of his most recognizable roles, one he would return to again in The Edge of Reason, Bridget Jones's Baby, and years later, Mad About the Boy in 2025. At that point, his career was no longer about proving himself. It was about range. He moved between roles without settling into one type. In Girl with a Pearl Earring, he became Johannes Vermeer, stepping into the stillness of a 17th century painter. In Nanny McPhee, he shifted into something lighter, more accessible. Then came Mamma Mia, a film built around music and energy, pulling him into a completely different rhythm, one that reached a global audience in a way few films do. But it was in 2009 that he took on a role that demanded something quieter and more internal. In A Single Man, he played a professor carrying the weight of loss, moving through grief with a controlled exterior while something deeper threatened to break through. The performance was restrained and deliberate, and it landed. It earned him his first Oscar nomination and a BAFTA win, marking a clear turning point. From there, his choices continued to change. He moved into roles that explored identity, deception, and memory. In Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, he played a man operating in a world of suspicion and betrayal. With Arthur Newman, he became someone trying to escape his own life entirely, faking his death to start again. In The Railway Man, he stepped into a story shaped by trauma and confrontation, searching for closure years after war had ended. At the same time, he balanced that weight with roles that leaned into precision and control. In Before I Go to Sleep, he played a husband navigating uncertainty as his wife's memory resets each day. Then, in Kingsman, The Secret Service, he shifted again, this time into something sharper, controlled, almost stylized. The calm, composed delivery, paired with sudden action, created a version of him that audiences had not fully seen before, and it carried through into the Golden Circle. By 2018, he was moving between worlds effortlessly. He returned to Mamma Mia. Here We Go Again stepped into The Happy Prince as a loyal friend to Oscar Wilde and took on The Mercy, playing a man isolated at sea, facing something far more internal than physical danger. That same year, he appeared in Mary Poppins Returns, adding another layer to an already varied career. In 2019, he appeared briefly in 1917, a film shaped by urgency and movement, directed by Sam Mendes. Then came The Secret Garden in 2020, followed by Supernova, where he portrayed a man navigating the slow, painful reality of his partner's dementia, a role grounded in emotion rather than spectacle. The pattern continued. In Operation Mincemeat, he returned to wartime storytelling, then shifted again into true crime with The Staircase, exploring a story built on uncertainty and suspicion. He appeared in Empire of Light, and even in a smaller moment, made a cameo in Rye Lane, showing that not every role needed to carry weight to matter. By 2025, in Lockerbie, A Search for Truth, he stepped into one of his most emotionally direct roles, playing a father dealing with the loss of his daughter in the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing. It brought everything back to something simple and heavy: grief, truth, and the need for answers. And through all of it, one thing stayed consistent. He never stayed in one place for too long: the balance between fame and private life. Since 1995, when Colin Firth stepped into the role of Mr. Darcy in the BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, everything about his career began to move in a different direction. That performance did more than introduce him to a wider audience. It defined an image that would follow him for years: the restrained, emotionally guarded man whose depth only revealed itself over time. From there, the momentum did not slow down. It built. He moved into a run of films that kept him firmly in the public eye, including Bridget Jones's Diary, Love Actually, Mamma Mia, and later, Mamma Mia. Here We Go Again, each one expanding his reach, each one reinforcing a presence that felt both familiar and dependable. It was not just about the roles, it was about consistency, about showing up in stories that connected while quietly holding his own space within them. By this point, at 65, his career had already stretched across decades, and the recognition matched that longevity. A Golden Globe, 2 European Film Awards, 2 BAFTAs, and an Academy Award for his portrayal of King George VI in The King's Speech all sat alongside the work itself. But what sat outside of film carried its own weight. His involvement in human rights and his advocacy for asylum seekers, refugee rights, and the environment added another layer to how he was seen, not just as an actor, but as someone engaged with the world beyond the screen. And yet, while his professional life appeared steady, his personal life followed a different rhythm. Most of his relationships began within the same spaces he worked in, on sets, around productions, in environments where proximity turned into connection. His longest and most defining relationship was with Italian producer and director Livia Giuggioli. They married in 1997, building a life that stretched over 2 decades, raising their sons, Luca, born in March 2001, and Matteo, born in August 2003. Over time, he adapted fully to that world, even becoming fluent in Italian, blending into her culture as much as his own. But by 2019, that relationship reached its breaking point. What followed was not quiet. It was described as messy, complicated, and difficult to contain once it became public. The turning point traced back to a brief separation between them, during which Giuggioli became involved with Italian journalist Marco Brancaccia, something she later acknowledged openly. What might have remained private quickly escalated when she accused him of stalking, an accusation he denied, pushing back with his own version of events. The situation did not settle cleanly. It unfolded in layers, with claims, counterclaims, and details that kept shifting the narrative. And even though there had been an attempt to repair the relationship after the affair, it did not hold. Behind the scenes, there had been effort. There had been a desire to keep the family intact, to move past what had happened. But according to those close to them, that effort had limits. At some point, the weight of it all became too much, and the decision that followed was not sudden but inevitable. No matter what had been tried, the betrayal stayed. And eventually, it became clear that moving forward together was no longer possible. Still, the ending was not entirely hostile. In 2020, a year after their separation, there was a moment that suggested something softer remained. Giuggioli posted a photo of him on his 60th birthday, writing about him as the best partner in crime for the past 25 years and counting. It was brief, but it revealed something important, that even after everything, not all of it had turned bitter. Before that marriage, there had been other chapters. One of the most significant was his relationship with the actress Meg Tilly. They met while working on Valmont in 1989, and what started on set turned into a 5-year relationship. In 1990, they had a son, William, adding another layer to his life long before his marriage to Giuggioli. Meg had her own established career, with roles in films like Psycho 2, The Big Chill, and Masquerade, along with a Golden Globe win for Agnes of God, and for a time, their lives moved in parallel. Then, in the mid-90s, around the same period that Pride and Prejudice reshaped his career, he had a shorter relationship with his co-star, Jennifer Ehle. On screen, their connection was central to the story, Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet, but off-screen, it proved more complicated. He later reflected on that experience, explaining that being involved with someone you are also telling a love story with can blur lines in a way that is not always easy to manage. Years later, in 2020, there were brief rumors linking him to newsreader Joanna Gosling after they were seen walking together in a West London park. Nothing concrete followed, and the moment passed without confirmation. Then, by 2022, a new chapter began quietly. He entered a relationship with TV writer Maggie Cohn, stepping once again into something more private, more contained. And through all of it, one pattern remains clear. No matter how steady things appear on the surface, the reality underneath has always been more layered, more complicated, and far less predictable than it first seems. 7 years later, Colin Firth's wife confirms why she cheated on him. For years after the divorce, there was almost nothing. No real explanations, no back and forth, no public unpacking of what had gone wrong. Just a quiet ending, carefully worded statements, and two people moving on without revisiting what had already played out. But in 2025, that silence shifted, and for the first time in a long time, Livia Giuggioli stepped forward and began to speak. What she revealed did not come across as defensive or emotional. It felt measured, almost reflective, as though enough time had passed for her to look at everything from a distance. And in that space, she made something clear. She does not miss the life she once had, not the attention, not the visibility, not the version of herself that existed within it. Her marriage to Colin Firth officially ended in 2019, closing a relationship that had lasted 22 years, one that began back in the 90s when they met on set and built a life that, for a long time, seemed steady from the outside. Since then, both of them have moved forward. She is now in a relationship with Scottish entrepreneur Callum Grieve, while Colin has been with TV writer Maggie Cohn since 2022, each stepping into something new without drawing attention to it. But what makes this situation different is not the fact that they moved on. It is how they chose to exist after everything that happened. Livia described a dynamic that does not follow the usual pattern of separation. She explained that they are still always together, not as a couple, but as something that has been rebuilt over time. It was not immediate, and it did not happen on its own. She made it clear that they had worked on it intentionally, with the focus staying on keeping their family intact. She described it in a way that almost sounds unlikely at first. She has a partner, he has a partner, and yet they all spend time together, not occasionally, but regularly. It is not two separate lives running side by side. It is something more blended, something that, in her words, feels like an extended, slightly chaotic family that somehow still works. Even in the smaller details, that balance shows itself. Her partner, Callum and Colin, have found common ground in football, both supporting Arsenal, something that has allowed them to connect in a way that feels easy, without tension or complication. At the center of it all are their two sons, Luca and Matteo, now grown, no longer needing the same kind of structure they once did, but still the reason that connection has been preserved. Back when the separation was first announced in 2019, the message was simple, that they remained united in their love for their children. Years later, that part has not changed. What has changed is everything around it. Livia now lives a much quieter life in Italy, far removed from the world that once defined her public image. When she looks back at that version of herself, it no longer feels familiar. She described moments of seeing the clothes, the gowns, and the heels, and realizing that she cannot even recognize the person who used to wear them, not because that life did not matter, but because she has moved so far from it. And in place of that life, something else has taken hold. Her work as an activist has become central, not just as a role, but as a focus. She has spent years exposing the realities behind the fashion industry, from hidden labor conditions to environmental impact, using her platform to push for change. Through EcoAge, the company she co-founded, she has worked to help businesses shift toward more sustainable practices, challenging the surface-level narratives that often dominate the industry. But within all of that, there is one detail that quietly ties everything back to the past. She acknowledged that much of the reach her work has had would not have been possible without her marriage to Colin, not in a way that takes away from what she built, but in a way that recognizes the platform it gave her. She admitted that the attention her campaigns received was, in part, connected to who she was married to, and without that, things might have unfolded differently. And that reflection sits at the center of everything she is saying now. Because when she speaks about that time, about that life, about what it took to move through it, there is an underlying suggestion that things were more complicated than they ever appeared, that what happened did not come out of nowhere, and that the choices that followed were tied to a reality that stayed hidden for a long time. On his side, Colin Firth has remained consistent. He has said very little, choosing to keep the details private, focusing only on what remains: the friendship, the shared responsibility as parents, and the decision to move forward without reopening the past. And between those two positions, one speaking and one staying quiet, the full picture begins to take shape, not in one clear statement, but in the space between what is said and what is left unsaid. What Colin Firth movie is your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.